Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome to another episode of the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin, here to bring you another very highly requested topic on this Friday podcast as we get into the details and the reasoning behind a potential Kyle Pitts trade. It's a question that I get asked a ton. Will the Falcons trade Kyle Pitts? Can they trade him? Should they trade him? I think should is probably the best way to frame this issue, because I think if they want to trade him, they will absolutely be able to trade him. He will have suitors, and I know there's a lot of hate for Kyle Pitts out there among Falcons fans. To preface everything, he obviously hasn't lived up to a top 5 pick, right? There's no question about that. But beyond that, we get into the conversation of what he is worth, and I think what I'm going to try to tell you is that Pitts is worth a lot because of a lot of factors, including his age, including that he does have extreme production in his last 3 seasons, essentially. He is one of the most efficient tight ends in the NFL on a per reception basis. There's a lot going for Pitts, and his career is really just getting started, considering that he is just 24 years old, people. There are plenty of rookies in this draft that are older than Kyle Pitts. So Kyle Pitts' career is just getting started, and while obviously he hasn't lived up to the top 5 pick, and that is ending up not being a good pick for the Falcons, his career is far from over, and there's a lot of opportunity for the narrative on Pitts to change still. The big question, of course, is that, career renaissance going to happen in Atlanta, or is it going to happen somewhere else? Because the Falcons do need picks. In case you're just joining us now for the first time this offseason, Falcons are short on picks this year. They've got 5, and 2 of them are 7th rounders. So not great situation draft-wise. And we'll get into the details of why and why not, should the Falcons trade Kyle Pitts. But to, we'll try to cover the salary cap angle, the draft compensation angle, and also, do the Falcons really want this type of player in their offense? Obviously, I think you should be trying to incorporate him if you're going to keep him. So do they actually want to do that, or do they want just a standard Y tight end, like more of a Charlie Werner type? And if that's what they want, then they're really squandering Pitt's value having him here in Atlanta. So we'll get into all that, guys. Before we do, real quick, I want to bring you word from our sponsors. First of all, BetOnline, folks. BetOnline remains the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025, whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor. BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA to college basketball to NHL, UFC. BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline's got you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. I know the NBA is back from the All-Star break, so that's a potential place you can go. Obviously, March Madness is going to get started here in just a few weeks. Lots to bet on, even though the NFL is unfortunately behind us for the time being. Don't worry, it'll be back before you know it. No matter what you want to bet on, betonline.ag is the place to do it. Make sure when you sign up to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to get access to the latest promotions. BetOnline, the game starts here. And of course, want to shout out once again Underdog Fantasy for sponsoring the show. Had a lot of fun playing Underdog during the playoffs, and if you haven't done Underdog before, it'll look very familiar if you've played things like Prize Picks and stuff like that. You basically pick a number of players. That's up to you. And you go and you basically pick guys that you think are going to outperform their expectations, whether that's higher or lower. You can do receiving yardage, you can do rushing yardage, touchdowns. You can do pretty much anything you could think of. It's an option. And one of the things I really liked about Underdog is you can set the numbers yourself. You can pick those higher or lower numbers. You can set that number to whatever you like, and it'll adjust obviously your prize up or down if you want to be more aggressive or less aggressive. It's a fun game. I enjoyed it. I didn't personally win anything, full disclosure, but that's more of a skill issue, I think. So if you have faith in your abilities or if you don't, you can still check it out. Underdog Fantasy. Make sure when you sign up to use our promo code, it's BIRDS, like the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast, BIRDS, to get access to a $1,000 bonus cash offer, as well as a free pick when you sign up for the first time in Underdog Fantasy. Thanks to those guys once again for sponsoring the show. All right. So let's dive in to Kyle Pitts. Now, let's get the sort of overall stuff out of the way first, right? So he's not been worth the 4th overall pick. I don't think anyone is arguing that at this point. There's not really a point to it. It's kind of it's over and done with. Now, if he has if they keep him and he has like another 1,000-yard season, then I think you can start saying, okay, well maybe it's more of a long-term payoff, whatever. But we don't have that information. We won't have that information for a year probably from now. So in that case, obviously he hasn't lived up to the pick. Some of that is on him. Some of that's obviously on the coaching. Some of that's on the scheme. Some of that's on the surroundings. The quarterback play, obviously, between Matt Ryan and this year has been extremely poor, right? So they're basically squandered multiple years of Pitt's career with quarterbacks that wouldn't start anywhere else in the NFL. That's how bad the situation was. And, we obviously have already talked about this to death, but Arthur Smith didn't really seem to understand how to use the guy that he drafted in the top 5, which is, a bizarre series of events when you prioritize a player over a quarterback and then you can't really figure out how to incorporate him into an offense, or that, figure out that he might need a good quarterback to be able to maximize his talents. I know that sounds crazy when you say it out loud, but it's crazy. So all that being said, Pitts is still absolutely an NFL tight end 1. His production over the past 2 years, his production in 3 of the past 4 years has been tight end 1 caliber. Obviously, in his rookie year, he was elite tight end production levels. So, 3 out of 4 years, he's been a tight end 1. So that is valuable, right? I mean, maybe it's not incredibly valuable like top 5 pick, but Pitts absolutely has performed like a receiving tight end 1 3 out of 4 years in the NFL, starting tight end. And this year had his highest touchdown total, 4 touchdowns, which is nice to see. And I think we saw, with better quarterback play, that Pitts could be involved. He wasn't still heavily involved, although he was involved. He wasn't completely worthless, as some people like to put out there, which is just inaccurate. It's hyperbole. I get it. Everyone's mad that Pitts isn't more involved in the offense and that he's not better. I get it, but we don't have to lie on the man, to make a point, right? So basically, the overall takeaway from that rant is that really it's up to the Falcons. Do the Falcons want him as a part of their 2025 plans or not? And obviously we'll find out soon. I think if they want to trade him, they'll probably do it early in free agency because they'll want the money, and we'll get to that in a minute. But look, at the end of the day, Pitts is 24 years old. He's going to be younger than a lot of rookies, and he's younger than probably a lot of second and third year players in the NFL at this point. So he's very young still, and there's a lot of, he's basically going to be reaching his peak athletically, in the next few years still. This is a player who absolutely has a chance for a mid-career sort of resurgence despite some issues. And the reason that you might expect him to improve going forward is, it's obvious. Look at what happened. He had an offensive coordinator an offensive play caller in Arthur Smith that didn't really execute a very advanced passing game. It didn't really seem to know how to incorporate Pitts into that passing game. The quarterback play was bad. And then he got hurt. And the injury was definitely, I think, a bigger issue than anyone let on. It seems to be a theme with this team. But, that got thrown into the mix. And for all we know, he's still dealing with some of the repercussions, psychological, physical, from that devastating knee injury. So, but he's 24 years old. There's no reason to think that he's permanently damaged or anything like that. I don't think that's the case. He's got plenty of time to recover, and with another offseason here, he's probably healthier than he's been at any point in the last couple of years. And again, he's 24, right? He's got a 1,000-yard season. He's got 2 600-yard seasons after that. He's a good tight end, right? He's not top 5 elite number 1 tight end in the league. We get it, right? But he is a good tight end still. So that's why I would say that the Falcons, a lot of people are like, oh, maybe the Falcons could get a day 3 pick or something. No. The Falcons won't answer the phone for less than a third rounder. Okay, straight up. If they take less than a third rounder for Pitts, then they're fools, because if Pitts has a good season this year, he's getting him a third round comp pick next year. So you can't really take less than a third. That's just the way it is. I think the Falcons will want more than that. I don't know if they'll be able to get it, but I think they would like a second or a third and a day 3 pick on top of that. I think they would be inclined to possibly accept the like a third and a fifth or something like that, given that they just need more picks to round out their draft class. So maybe they'd be willing to forego that higher second round pick, like to get a third and a fifth, because they just need the volume of picks. But I don't know. I do think that that's kind of the compensation you're looking at. I don't think they'll really entertain anything less than that. But the reason I think a lot of people have floated for why they'll have a hard time trading him is because of his contract, which is he's on his 5th year option, which is a first round pick. You know, you get that 5th year option. It's 1 year guaranteed, and it's, you know, relatively high salary. So for Pitts as a tight end, that 5th year option is just, it's $11 million. It's not that much for a top tight end. So, like, for reference, $11 million would make Kyle Pitts the 11th highest paid tight end in 2025 before any new deals go out, which there could be more deals that happen that push him lower on that list. That's almost exactly where he is production-wise in the NFL. He was 13th in receiving yardage and touchdowns. He was actually 3rd in yards per reception among the tight ends with 50-plus targets with 12.8. He's been one of the most consistently efficient tight ends while he's been in the NFL in terms of yards per reception. He still had that legendary, of course, rookie season where he hit 15.1 yards per reception on a redonkulous number of targets, which is just really impressive. I mean, like, I wish we could see that again. On 110 targets, 68 catches, which, you know, obviously there was a lot of go balls and stuff like that. 15.1 yards per reception on over 100 targets. I mean, that's pretty nutty. That's the Kyle Pitts I think a lot of people were expecting, and I think that Kyle Pitts isn't gone. I think he still exists and could be a thing. Giving context to this in terms of the Falcons, a lot of people say, oh, well, he's been okay, but he wasn't very useful for the Falcons. Well, that's not really true either, right? Because he was 4th on the team in receiving, which is disappointing, no doubt. But the team, Kirk Cousins in particular, had an obsession with Ray McCloud, and he threw Ray McCloud a ton of targets, right? More than you would think were justified given Ray McCloud's status, but, you know, it didn't turn out horribly. But, you know, you still kind of would expect Pitts to have more. I believe overall Pitts had, double check the numbers here. Pitts had a total of 74 targets, so he did actually end the season with about 14 fewer targets than Ray McCloud, and had almost as many yards, right, and more touchdowns. So, you know, I think maybe that's more of a Kirk Cousins problem than a Pitts problem, an offensive design problem than a Pitts problem. Again, you know, and Pitts was also 3rd on the team in receiving touchdowns, so a key contributor. Those 4 touchdowns obviously really important. And, of course, 2nd on the team in yards per reception, behind only Darnell Mooney, who had a ridiculous 15.5 yards per reception. So Pitts was a core part of the offense. He just wasn't. He was the 4th option, essentially. And obviously, you're disappointed in that. I think I think he's probably the 3rd, like at best, he's the 3rd option in this offense. I think that's what we were kind of hoping for, being that sort of like high variance, you know, deep target matchup guy. They just didn't really utilize him consistently there, which is why he ended up falling behind Ray McCloud. But I think if you swapped, you know, Pitts and Ray McCloud's roles, you know, Pitts has a better season overall. You know, and I think he arguably did have the better season overall than Ray McCloud, despite not being as featured in the offense. But basically all this to say that the talk of Pitts being like useless, oh, he's a waste of a roster spot, he's not part of the offense, it's just objectively not true, right? So I would, you know, you guys could say, not saying that everyone that watches the show would say that, because I know most of you are very intelligent. Clearly, if you're watching me, you must be incredibly handsome, intelligent people. No, but it just in honesty, like, he's clearly not worthless. It's just objectively incorrect to say that he was useless or a waste of a roster spot or not a part of the offense. He just wasn't as much as we wanted or should have been, we could also say. But I think, you know, you look at all of this stuff that adds up, and you could easily tell the story of a team thinking that like if we are prepared to give Kyle Pitts, you know, like 100 targets, like make him a key part of our offense, then we absolutely could get plus value out of Pitts that the Falcons have failed to get. And you look at an offense like the Chiefs. This is a very common one that we see. That could the Falcons trade Pitts to the Chiefs? They obviously need weapons, and Kelsey's flirting with retirement. So could the Falcons make that move? That is a fascinating decision tree. But again, you look at a team like the Chiefs, who you think is a smart team. If they're actually interested in trading for Kyle Pitts, that should give the Falcons a lot of pause, right? That like, wow, if this great team that's in the Super Bowl every year is wanting to trade for our player that we haven't been able to figure out, maybe that should be a clue that we should just figure this out and not let him get away if the Chiefs are really calling about him. So, multiple things to consider there. Ultimately, though, like the decision to trade Kyle Pitts should come down to, are they actually going to do something more with him or not? Because if you're not going to do anything more with him, you're probably not making full use of this 11 million cap hit. And if you can get assets for him, obviously there's no dead cap involved with the trade, so you don't have to worry about taking on any stuff. Like at this point, you could trade him free and clear, get all the cap space, which is right around $11 million, which is not nothing, right? When the Falcons are still over the cap by 4 point something million, and they're low on picks, you can start to see why the argument for trading Kyle Pitts can look pretty tantalizing, right? Like it can look very interesting to the Falcons. When does Zack Robinson really want to feature a tight end like that? Obviously, like I think Kyle Pitts has taken steps as a blocker to where he's serviceable now, but he's still not a plus blocker. It seems like what the Falcons want at tight end is like Charlie Werner, essentially. Maybe even a couple Charlie Werners. And you don't need to spend $11 million to get Charlie Werner. We spent like $3 million to get Charlie Werner, or you can draft another tight end to kind of add to that room. Maybe you let Pitts go, you recoup some picks. At least one day 2 pick has to be involved for me to support a Kyle Pitts trade. And you take that and you build this offense the way Zack Robinson wants to, the way he's comfortable with, and maybe that's the best way forward. Because look, Zack Robinson he's no longer a rookie OC, but he is a young offensive coordinator, and maybe trying to make him figure out Kyle Pitts, which stooped, Arthur Smith, who's still getting head coach interviews for reasons. Maybe trying to make Zack Robinson figure that out while he's trying to juggle all this other stuff going on. Maybe that's not the best use of his time. Maybe it's better to just run the offense that Robinson's comfortable with and get assets for Pitts now. So, I think that's the argument for trading Kyle Pitts. You can get a day, I believe, this is my opinion, you can get at least a day 2 pick, hopefully a second, but maybe a third and a day 3 pick, to facilitate it. The fact that he is somewhat, he's not cheap. Like he's not on like his, he's not on like a cheap rookie deal. He's on like a, top 13, top 15 tight end contract. But that could be a bargain if you end up getting elite tight end production out of him. So that makes it a little bit harder to justify like a crazy pick for Pitts. But I do think a second rounder or a third and some change is probably what you're asking for. And obviously the Falcons need the picks, and they could use the cap relief too. And if he's really not a big part of their plans, like if they are just going to go into next year with him being the 4th option, I don't think it's worth paying him that money to be the 4th option. Obviously, you can't just say like, oh, Pitts could be like a back. Like say if there's injuries, the Falcons were very fortunate to not have a lot of injuries on offense last year. If there were an injury, having Pitts as the 4th option could be very valuable, because now he gets lifted up into a higher role, and maybe that could help the team weather a loss at wide receiver or so forth. And maybe that is still valuable. But again, you're not getting plus value unless somebody else gets hurt, which you don't love that. You typically would rather have these sort of guys that could step into larger roles and help you out be on the like rookie end of the scale or like the cheaper end of the scale, not guys you're paying tons of money to. But I digress. There is a path, I think, for him starting the season as the 4th option and like growing into a bigger role as things sort of adjust. And there's also whatever. But basically, the quick takeaway is the Falcons could decide that they want the cap space, they want the picks, and they just don't really have a great plan for Kyle Pitts beyond what we've already seen, which has him as basically like a tight end one, starting caliber receiving tight end, on the edge of that top 10 ranking, but not an elite tight end. And that's not worth $11 million to them. That's not worth passing up on the draft picks that they need now. So they decide to trade him there. So that's the argument for trading him. I think it's a compelling one. I also think there's a compelling argument to be made that you drafted this guy in the top 5. That's already happened. So, like, again, it obviously the GM that drafted him is still here, so that does hold a little bit more sway than it would if they had cleaned house. Like, I think if they had fired Fontenot when they brought in, Raheem Morris and hired a new GM, Pitts would probably already be gone, right? Because the new GM doesn't want that headache. But with Fontenot here, I think there's a higher chance that they do hold him and try to, like, demonstrate that they were right. And a lot of times it's like, oh, is that a good idea? Like, should you just be trying to prove yourself right, or should you be trying to win football games? I think here you could have those two things dovetail together, right? Like, I think there is a case to be made that Pitts has been a little bit slowed by injury mentally as well. There's more to coming back from an injury than just healing the ligaments, guys. Like, it affects everything about how you train and run on the field, and it's in the back of your mind when you get hit. Am I going to aggravate it? There's a lot that goes into that. So it could be that he just needed a bit more time. It could be that now he has a quarterback in Michael Penix who fits him as well as anyone did, other than maybe, he's basically giving him like Matt Ryan, like not saying Michael Penix is on Matt Ryan's level yet. Maybe someday he could get there, but basically giving him that caliber of quarterback, like that's even better than like a Kirk Cousins, where Cousins just his skill set didn't translate to a good connection with Kyle Pitts. We saw with Penix, Penix is more willing to rip the ball downfield, so that could really complement Kyle Pitts. And maybe the Falcons decide we're gonna turn the tight end, or at least one of, like, maybe we're gonna play more 2 tight ends and have Pitts as more of a vertical threat in this offense. Then that obviously fits what Penix likes to do really well. That could be a better fit for him. The other thing, maybe Zack Robinson is a little bit more experienced. He's got his feet under him. Doesn't have to worry about, a quarterback change. Not like a debate over who's the quarterback, right? Michael Penix is the quarterback. You have all offseason to design this offense. Maybe that's enough time and he's got enough experience now to have a better idea of what to do with Kyle Pitts, and they will actually be able to craft this role for him that makes him a more featured target. Maybe he's still not getting, he's probably still not getting more. He's not going to get more targets than Drake London. Drake London's going to get the most targets. He's the wide receiver 1. That's just how this goes. Maybe Darnell Mooney still gets more targets because Darnell Mooney's awesome, so that's not really a knock on Pitts, but I think maybe there's a scenario where we start to value Pitts more than Ray McCloud. I think that should be the calculus. I think Ray McCloud should still play and still be a part of the offense, but I think you should just flip those guys, right? You have Pitts as more of the third option, but maybe he ends up being as productive or closer in production to like a wide receiver 3, a good one. You want him to get closer to that 1,000-yard mark, right? Because while he's not getting tons of targets, like his target share isn't the same as, Drake or Darnell Mooney, those targets could be very valuable deep targets that he only needs to hit one of those a game to be getting to these receiving yardage numbers. And he's just more of an efficiency tight end, not like a raw, I think that's more of the style of player he is. He's not like a target hog tight end. He's more of a, really efficient, explosive downfield passing game option. We've seen this type of tight end work. Obviously, Jimmy Graham is a great example. There's been others. You just have to be willing to really emphasize that part of your offense and craft that role for him. And it remains to be seen if they're willing to do that. But if they are, it could, I think, be worth it to just hold him. Because, again, all you're risking is $11 million, and you're passing on these picks. But my guess is if they decide to hold him, it's either, it would be because the offers for him aren't as robust as you would need them to be to make the trade, because teams are trying to lowball you because they know you need picks and they know you're low on cap space and you really haven't maximized this player. So teams are going to try to lowball the Falcons on Pitts. They can't take a lowball offer. I don't think they will. I think that's one thing that Fontenot has been really good at is he kind of knows, I think, the value of assets pretty well, and doesn't overpay. And I don't think he's really let anyone go via trade for a discount, right? I think he knows what these players are worth, and he's going to, for better or worse, stick to the value that they are. It's burned the Falcons a couple times on pass rushers. Danielle Hunter, Montez Sweat, team not really willing to overpay to get those guys. They go elsewhere, but they're not strapped with, issues either from giving out terrible contracts or overpaying for guys or sending any ridiculous assets around. So, that is one thing I think we can applaud Fontenot for is he does seem to have a good understanding of the value of like the veteran market. Obviously, as a pro personnel guy, I think that's really been his strength, and probably the Falcons should emphasize that, leverage that more. Which is maybe why you want to keep Pitts, because he's already in the building. He's that veteran player. Maybe we want to keep the veterans going, not get as many rookies in here. I don't know. But I think that's basically the two choices ahead of you, right? You move him for picks and for cap relief, and because you don't really have that sort of role in the offense that would justify the investment or the opportunity cost of, that money and those picks and how much that can help your team defensively, for example, which is where you have desperate needs, where offensively you were pretty much fine. But Kyle Pitts was your fourth target, so you do need to replace that somehow. And then the other option, of course, is to hold Pitts, believe that all the things that I said about his value and stuff like that are true, and that you actually do generate a career year, or, maybe not a career year because year one was really good, but maybe a year where he gets like 850 yards, but gets more touchdowns or something. Because, one touchdown year one, don't love that. He has gone up in touchdowns every year. He had 1, 2, 3, and then 4 this last year. So should get 5 this year. Should get 5 this year, right? If the pattern holds. But you feel like you're going to be able to craft a better role for him, make him a higher priority in your offense, and you believe that maybe he's getting healthier and that the best is yet to come, or the flashes that we saw as a rookie, we can replicate that now. We feel really good about our quarterback situation. We don't want to mess with this offense. We liked how this offense was coming together. We want to give Pitts and Penix an opportunity to make this work. And we stick with it. You keep, and that also probably means that you don't really have to go out and upgrade your passing game weapons at all. Like, I think if you move on from Pitts, that means you have a need at tight end. You have a need for another, big, like at least the fourth target in your offense level receiver. If you keep Pitts, you don't have to worry about that. Although you do obviously have no longer would get the money released, and you wouldn't have any extra picks from the trade. But you don't create a hole at the same time. But the title of the episode is "Should the Falcons Trade Kyle Pitts?" And that is a harder question to answer. I think the only way I could answer it like with conviction would be to know what Zack Robinson is thinking, and know, so to me it comes down to what Zack Robinson wants. Does Zack Robinson want to craft a role for Kyle Pitts? Does he want Kyle Pitts to be a core part of the offense, a top 3 target that he's going to be willing to game plan for, to create a game plan for, to get him the ball in advantageous situations, to take advantage of his skill set? If he's willing to do that and maximize Kyle Pitts, I think there's a very compelling case to be made that pairing him and Penix, you could see this resurgent year. Pitts hopefully, gets through camp and preseason healthy, and you see this return to this dominant player that we saw his rookie year. And now he's 25. He'll be 25, and you could potentially either extend him and make him a key part of your offense going forward, or you could let him walk for a 3rd-round comp pick, or if he is that good, you tag him and trade him potentially, right? You either extend him or you tag and trade him for a premium pick for someone that's really looking for that tight end. Now, obviously, the tight end tag is not as crazy as other tags. I'll pull up the number, the projected number for that, so you can kind of see what I'm getting at. It is significantly less than receiver. So, for example, the projected tag for a wide receiver would be $26.3 million, which is a lot. That's like premium elite receiver money. That tight end tag is $14.6 million. So again, that's not that terrible for a 1,000-yard player. Saying he reaches those lofty heights, right? So if you hold Pitts, you have the potential, obviously, to cash in more or keep an asset in the building that could end up paying off. Now, the other side of the coin, I think if Zack Robinson is iffy at all on Kyle Pitts, like if he's like, I don't know if I can figure this out, I don't really want to spend time on that, I'd rather emphasize other parts of the offense, or I'd rather it stay 11, I'd rather have a blocking tight end, that's just what I'm more comfortable with. That and I think we're going to go more that route, and we would have Pitts as mostly like a tertiary option here, or like an occasional deep threat, but he's gonna split snaps with Charlie Werner, and he's not going to be this featured player in the offense. If that's what Robinson wants and is going to do, then they need to trade him. Then they should absolutely trade him, because if he's doing that role, you're not increasing his value by keeping him. You're unlikely to get better than that third round comp pick, which again, you're going to have to wait until 2027 at this point. Like if you keep Pitts and he signs elsewhere next year, assuming you even get the comp pick, because maybe you're signing other free agents and they could cancel that out, you wouldn't get it until 2027. So I think if you're holding Pitts, you're expecting to at least try to extend, like you're hoping you're going to be extending him, or tag and trade him. You're really not hoping for this third round comp pick. Like you're hoping for more than that, which I think is a very lofty expectation. Which is why, if they don't really feel strongly about Pitts, or they're not going to commit to crafting this role for him, then they should trade him, get the picks that you need now to bolster the defense, get the cap space to help, again, make some key signings to help bolster this defense, and go find another, Charlie Werner, maybe a more receiving focused version of Charlie Werner. Like a lot of people have brought up Austin Hooper as like a meme. I actually think that's not a meme. I think that could be a good idea. Hooper didn't perform as well as Kyle Pitts last year, but in New England, he had about 450 yards and some touchdowns, and he at this point he won't be expensive, because he's coming off several years of not being worth that big contracts he was getting. So you bring in someone like an Austin Hooper, who we know can block a bit, not a great blocker, but again, a serviceable one. You have Charlie Werner as your main blocker, Hooper is more of your receiver, and you're mostly a 3-receiver team like Zack Robinson wants, and you move forward from there. So I think that's the calculus. Does Zack Robinson want to do this or not? Does he want to emphasize Kyle Pitts the way he needs to be emphasized to justify his salary and justify passing on draft compensation for him? If he wants to do that, then he should stay. And if he doesn't, then he should be traded. But again, the Falcons may have to wait. They may have to wait till after the draft. Teams may try to lowball them. And in that case, you're going to have to wait. And obviously they could still save the cap space by trading him after the draft, but the picks would then be in the next draft, which you don't love. But we'll see how it plays out. I think the Pitts thing is one of the more fascinating things to watch. The one thing they can't do is cut Pitts, right? For those that I know that was asked by someone. You save not like it's fully guaranteed, so there's no cutting Kyle Pitts. You either trade him or keep him. There's no other option. And for the record, I think it would be dumb to cut Kyle Pitts anyway. Now, maybe if you could just straight save the $11 million, there could be some kind of argument for it, but I don't really see any point to doing that. So at this point, I think that we will either see Kyle Pitts traded or kept. My gut, not weighing in from what I would do personally, my gut tells me that it's probably going to be a Kyle Pitts trade. I do think that they will more likely than not try to trade him. Whether the trade actually happens depends on what the offers are. I don't think they're just going to trade him because they want to. I think they will demand a certain caliber of compensation. And if teams aren't willing to provide it, then they'll hold him as long as it takes to get that compensation. But I think Pitts, as long as he's in Atlanta, even throughout the season this year in 2025, will be a subject of trade questions. Like if the Falcons, fall off or they're not playing well and it's not looking good, he could definitely be moved at the trade deadline, that sort of thing as well. So that's kind of the calculus. the answer to should the Falcons trade Kyle Pitts is complicated. It really comes down to what the team wants to do. Do they want to feature him or not? And if they do, they should keep him. And if they don't, they should get those picks and use them somewhere that they are going to be featured more. And then the cap space too, obviously. So there you have it, guys. I tried to cover every angle of it that I could think of, but there may be some things I missed. If you have other questions, feel free to throw them in the chat or in the comments. It's not a live show, sorry. Throw them in the comments. We love to hear from you guys. Please like, subscribe if you haven't done so already. Really appreciate that. If you want to support the show, you can do so by joining us on Patreon or on YouTube, the channel memberships. Appreciate everyone for doing that. And we will be back next week. We'll have Tuesday Takes with Trayshawn on the topic du jour. And then, of course, we'll be inching closer and closer to the NFL Combine over the next week. And we'll have some Combine and draft content coming for you. And then soon after that, it'll be free agency. It's crazy how fast things are moving. So we will have plenty of stuff for you here on the Dirty Birds podcast and Falcoholic Live. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Kevin at Falcoholic Kevin. Thanks again to Underdog Fantasy and to Bet Online for sponsoring today's episode. We will see you guys next time on the pod. Have a good day.